Awesome. Okay. Well, real quick, obviously we're here today to talk about new construction, but I do like to kind of get a pulse or a little lay of the land to see where we are in terms of experiences. So I know what we're working with. So would you guys mind just kind of going around real quick and telling me what you're hoping to get out of class today? And if you have any experience with new construction so far? Allison, you want to go first? Oh, I think you're muted. I still can't hear you. Oh, there we go. Okay.
How about now? Sorry, I was updating my calendar while you were talking. Shame on me for multitasking. Anyway, so I have not had a whole lot of experience with new construction aside from just chatting with a couple of clients that are interested in it. And I feel in doing that, I feel really not very well versed because I do know that there's incentives that they offer. And so I've sold one new construction, and that was in Atlanta when I was down in Georgia. So there's incentives, and I know that you can negotiate the incentives. I really want to know more of what parameters are around new construction. What are we capable of doing as agents with a client, and how flexible are the agents that are representing the builders?
Absolutely. Totally valid. I mean, I think we can all agree that with new construction, it can be a little intimidating to know where we add value, honestly, because the process is so lengthy and honestly so well explained most of the time by the builder, but at the same time, there's a lot that you don't know. So we'll talk about a lot of that, both in terms of the process and finding a good way to explain it to our clients. And like I mentioned in the email this morning, we're going to talk about some things that we can ask, some important questions that honestly will make us look really knowledgeable in front of our clients, and it's stuff that they will want to know, but totally valid also around incentives. Cool. Thanks for sharing. What about you, Amy?
The new construction that I have done has always been completed or nearly completed at the point in which they purchased them. But and I personally purchased a new construction, but before I was in real estate, and there were definitely things that I would have preferred our agent had let us know about prior to or during the process. So yeah, but I have a client looking at potentially building and just trying to figure out the ropes of all of that as well, since all of my new construction has been on the essentially completed side.
Absolutely. There are definitely some benchmarks that come throughout the process. We'll talk about all of this. Sounds good. I'll be interested to hear, feel free to chime in as we go through it. I don't want to ask now, but I will be interested to hear what it is that you wish your agent had told you. So feel free to kind of chime in when that moment comes. Kim, what about you?
I have a little bit of experience with new construction. I think I sold like 3 in Atlanta. But there were situations that I was a little uncomfortable about, in terms of the way that their documents were drafted up. So if we could kind of touch on that a little more, I think I would be more comfortable. I expect that one of the clients that I plan to work with this spring, I believe that they're going to be looking towards new construction. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a huge difference in the documents from North Carolina to Georgia. So that's kind of where I am with it.
Love it. Yeah, the builder contracts are a little intimidating, but I definitely will touch on all of those. And then I do have a few examples of some stuff we can look at too. So we'll cover all of that. But as we're going through that aspect of it, feel free to stop me if there's anything kind of specific that you're curious about. Cool. Thanks. Carrie, it's good to see you today. How are you this morning? What are you hoping to get out of today? Oh, I can't hear you for some reason. It does say you're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. have no idea what just happened. But I'm glad to be here. So I have zero experience with new construction. For those who don't know me, I'm not with Choice right now, but I'm kind of making my way over there. So I currently work in land sales. So I have found land for people to do new construction on. That's about it, honestly. And I have a close friend who actually works for a builder, and I always hear in my ear what he's telling me from his perspective. So that's what piqued my interest with this class. I was like, well, I would just want to absorb it all, right?
Well, we will cover a lot. It honestly might be a little daunting. So as you guys know, I'll say it again, but I do record these classes. So you can always go back and listen to it again while you're in the car or watch it back. I'll also provide the slides, but you're in a great position because so few of us actually have experience buying land. And we do have clients that will ask us, they'll start on the resale path and they'll look at new construction and they'll be like, well, what if I buy land and then build on it? And I think there's this misconception that somehow it's going to save them a lot of money. And it doesn't. That's not necessarily the case. But even knowing where to find land and how that works is a great value, but we'll cover a lot. So feel free to do a little hand raise or chime in if you have questions about what we're talking about. And then Billy Joe, thanks for hopping on. I know you said your connection isn't too great. She wanted to just put in the chat she doesn't have any experience with new construction, so we're all ears. Awesome. All right, you guys. Well, we'll go ahead and jump on in then. I'm going to, give me just a second. I'm going to share my screen. Maybe. All right. So we are talking about new construction today. That is no surprise considering everything we just went through. But, you know, as all of you have noticed, new construction can be a little intimidating. It is obviously very similar to resale in a lot of ways. However, it is a lot more drawn out and there are a lot of options. And like we talked about when I was talking with Allison, you know, it can be a little hard for us as agents to understand where we fall into play. And to make sure that we're setting proper expectations in terms of what is the builder responsible for and what can they do versus what can we as clients do and what are those major benchmarks along the way. So as always, I've designed this class to cover as much as possible. It can be a little intimidating, but it is kind of a checklist of sorts. And I try to go through everything that you might run into, the benchmarks, and kind of go through it in a process of sorts. And then at the end, I'll touch on some things that are additional questions people might have. But like I mentioned a million times, feel free to stop me, raise a hand, pop in if you have any questions. So first and foremost, what is new construction? Well, I think we can all agree it is a brand new house, right? But there are a number of options when it comes to purchasing new construction. There's a variety of in between, but the ones that you're going to see the most are often going to be either pre-sale, or an inventory home. You'll also hear inventory homes called spec homes, or an inventory home with selection options. So a pre-sale home is kind of what you typically will think of, or what a client typically thinks of when they hear the term new construction, meaning that they recognize that they are making all of the decisions and that they are completely picking out the home that they are wanting, to the extent of what the builder provides. Inventory homes are kind of the opposite of these. I'll go through each of these more in depth in just a minute. Inventory homes are what Amy was speaking about more so, where they're pretty well completed. They are new, but the builder has made these selections and we're just coming in kind of towards the end of the process and saying, yep, this is mine. And kind of going from there. Now, there are options where the builder has made selections on a home and it is slated to be an inventory home, but it might not be too far along in the process. And so there are options for the buyer to go in and make selections for small things, not major changes, but small items. And so we'll kind of break down each of those, but just understanding how each of those works, you know, when we do a buyer consultation, at least in my experience, I very much target it towards thinking that my clients are going to be doing resale. But if I hear that they start being interested in new construction, then I kind of put a timeout in place and I say, let's regroup and let's sit down and talk about how this works. And it's kind of its own buyer consultation of sorts. And so just explaining these items to your clients can be quite helpful. I will also spend a little bit of time talking about luxury homes and custom builds, although not too much. They're kind of a world of their own. But at the same time, the processes are very similar. So we'll talk about all of that today. So first and foremost, a pre-sale, like I said, this is where the buyer is getting everything that they have selected. So when we look at any given property for purchase and new construction, there's three aspects that come into play when we're thinking about the price. You've got the floor plan, the layout of the house, you've got the lot that it sits on, and any selections that are made. Now, in a pre-sale, the client is picking all of these, and each of these items have a set price point. So your floor plan is going to have a base price. You then can go into the floor plan and make certain selections or updates. So one of the most common ones that you'll see, for instance, is when you can convert, a property might have an office downstairs or flex room, and you might be able to upgrade that to an office or upgrade it even higher to a bedroom down. Or you can go in and make little selections like adding a fireplace and things of that sort. So you can customize it based on what would be considered permittable items. So items that they have to submit to the county for permitting. These are going to be structural selections, electrical, plumbing, and exterior for the most part. And so your standard price with that home is going to have its base, and then anything above that is going to be added. You then are going to pick a lot. Now, where the home falls within the neighborhood is going to have its own price. So understandably, the ones that are backing up to other houses are going to be your most affordable. Very often when you are doing pre-sale, there will be very few, if any, options that are zero lot premiums. Most of the time, there is some premium or cost for the lot. The cheapest ones are going to be the ones that back up to one another. The next up is going to be a corner lot. Then you're going to be looking at ones that either back up to trees or maybe back up to a green space, and those are going to be your most expensive. And so if a client is working within a given price point, as we all are, this is one of the best ways that we can kind of get the house that they want at a slightly lower price. Or maybe they've got a little more to play with and we can be a little more selective. Then they have the right to select any selections. Most of the time, these are going to be cosmetic things. We're talking about flooring, cabinets, countertops, lighting, the handles on the cabinets themselves, bathroom finishes, and things of that sort. So there are some builders that offer that. Oh, I just did all of that. I forgot I had all these slides, y'all. Okay, so pre-sale, we come in, we pick the plan. First and foremost, we're going to make a selection. Now, taking a step back, when we are doing these, we want to be recognizing, just as we would with any client doing a resale search, that there are criteria that we can know is their dream scenario versus a criteria that we're going to use for their search. And so a lot of times, especially if it's pre-sale and therefore slightly customizable to a certain extent, then there's going to be options for upgrades. Like I said, you might be able to turn this dining area, for instance, into a bedroom down. And so if I'm doing a search, then I'm going to be looking on the websites. I'm either going to look on MLS or I'm going to look on the builder website for floor plans that have, let's say we wanted 4 bedrooms. I'm going to look at 3 bedrooms, and then I'm going to click through them and see which of these have the option to upgrade to a 4 bedroom. Same thing with layout. I'm going to look through all of these. Now, let's talk about a search real quick. When we're talking about these, you absolutely can look on MLS. If you do look on MLS, I would recommend looking at things that are pending and closed within the criteria that you've selected over the past, 3 months or so. The reason being, new construction does not have to go into MLS. And so very often what you will see is they don't put it in there, especially if it's pre-sale, because there's no guarantee that that house has to go on that lot, for example. And so what they'll do is they'll wait until it goes under contract or wait until it closes and then put it in MLS strictly for comp's sake, so that appraisers have something to look at. And so just recognizing that when you go into MLS and you do a search and you don't see anything that's active, it could be the case, but I would start by doing what's pending and closed. Kim, yes.
I wanted to ask, is it standard for the builders to actually put like specific details if it is just kind of like not necessarily a pre-sale, but an inventory home? So for instance, if my client is looking for a 2-story family room, is that something that they typically would put in description, or do they keep it pretty basic?
If it is an inventory, great question. If it's an inventory home, they typically will put it on MLS just to increase their leverage and visibility. I would say they typically would put stuff like that in there. Now, something that specific, it's hard to say, but likely. I mean, they treat it like a typical listing in terms of being pretty detailed. So thankfully, they're not one of those agents that normally just plops it in there with like no information. They do try to fluff it so that they get some attention. Absolutely.
Okay.
The other place though that you can look are the builder websites. And so I'll show you one of those in just a minute, and that's going to be likely your best bet. But when you're doing that, you'll pick the floor plan. You'll normally have a number of options to choose from. Each builder will normally have, I don't know, like 6 to 10 floor plans, sometimes a little bit more. That's typically around that range. So they might have a few, like 2 or 3 ranch plans, and then the rest will be 2 stories. Like I said, we're going to pick our lot. Now, when you do this, you can go on the builder website, but I'll get to this in just a moment. Your best bet for lot information in terms of availability is always going to be at the model home or speaking to the builder representative themselves. The reason that they don't put it in MLS also is because it's so hard to update. Their sales come through all the time. And so it's just one more system for them to populate. That said, when we're looking at these lots, this isn't the best example for it, but one thing to keep in mind is obviously you're going to have ones that are sold, you're going to have ones that are available, but then you also might have some that are grayed out. And so when we're looking at new construction, builders will release communities in phases. Meaning if they have 100 lots that they need to sell in total, they might release 30 this month, and they'll wait until all of those are sold or until they've got like 2 of them left. And then when they're at the end, then they'll release the next one, the next phase. And so a certain phase might be almost completely sold out, or it might be available, but not have the options that your clients want. Maybe your clients really want this one floor plan, for instance, or they really want to be on a corner lot and there's no corner lots available. Be sure to always ask the builder, okay, do you have any more phases coming up? Now, keep in mind, as with anything, but especially new construction, anytime they release a new phase, the prices will go up. Something to keep in mind, but just know that they, if something is sold out, it's not that hope has been lost completely. The other thing to note though, is exactly what I have here. Not every plan will fit on every lot. Ranch style homes, for instance, are a larger footprint. And so if your client really wants this one ranch floor plan, well, that floor plan might not be able to fit on certain lots. And so we need to keep that in mind when we're picking things out, when we're driving the neighborhood. Also, your neighbor selection will have an impact on what you are able to select in terms of exterior and likely floor plan. They don't want 3 of the same floor plans right next to one another. And so if you like a given one, but 2 of the neighbors have already picked theirs and you want this one lot, well, you've got one of 2 options. You either pick a different lot or you pick a different floor plan. Now, sometimes they'll let you pick a different exterior so that it just looks different, but just know that that's a possibility. Yes, Kim.
Another thing I noticed when working with clients, sometimes this is, it's basically up to somebody's discretion, but I've noticed where lots are less expensive when they're closer to the retention pond. Some people, they kind of will put a buffer around it, with the shrubbery and the greenery and foliage and all of that. But sometimes that's worked for people too, where they were able to get a better lot price because of the location near the retention pond.
Absolutely. And the price of, or the premium or the price of the lots is totally dependent on the builder and what they dictate. I have seen, kind of the standard of what I typically work with, buyers that are buying properties at, 400,000, 500,000 that are new construction. Most of those lots are going to be between $2,500 and $10,000, sometimes $12,000. However, I have absolutely toured properties or neighborhoods in, the Apex area where you might have some lots that are $20,000 or $50,000. And so that can be a dramatic increase in your price. But to your point, exactly, Kim, I mean, things that might be less appealing to other people might totally not be a concern to your client. Now, that said, though, as always, I think it's our job to educate our clients on things that they might not be thinking about. So although this is just a side note, but although something might not be a concern to them, just know that it might limit their potential buyer pool in the future. So you might not care if you back up to the retention pond, for example, or what they call a BMP. I don't even remember what it stands for, but it's exactly that, a retention pond. And so just recognizing that, you might not worry about this, but just know some people in the future might when you go to resell. Don't want that to deter you. I just want you to know that. Now, what is a retention pond? Just want to throw that out there because I don't think I've put it anywhere in here. But obviously, when you are going through this process and you are plowing down a ton of trees and changing the elevation and the slope of a given land, you have to have somewhere for the water to go. And so when they are developing new construction, they are required to put in at least one, but likely multiple retention pond type areas within the neighborhoods that as they're building, the water has somewhere to go. Sometimes these will be filled with water. Most of the times, more and more now, what they call a BMP, will be an area that is designed for when it rains heavily, and then it will fill, but in general, it's just going to be some grassy area. Keep in mind, it might mean there's a little more mosquitoes. It might also mean that you have to be a little more specific with the HOA in terms of where you can build a fence, for example. But I digress a little bit. Kim, did you have another question or something else you wanted to add?
No.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Of course. Then we're going to go in and we're going to make our selections. Now, when we do this, we're doing it in 2 phases, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but there's the structural selections that you're making, like we talked about. These are going to be things like adding walls, adding electrical wiring different places. And then there's going to be the stuff that we kind of see as fun. But when we're making our structural selections, those are going to be things that have to be permitted. And so these are things that are required to be decided on at the time of contract. You may have a day or 2 to play with it, but not normally. If you do, you kind of have to ask them to make an exception. We are making this decision at the time of contract. And then after that point, we cannot add anything or take anything away that's structural because it has to be permitted and it has to be submitted to the county. So just setting that expectation with your client is incredibly important, because something that seems very easy to them, understandably so, is something that unfortunately we won't have the option to go back for. So one of the examples of this that I had was a client that was just really wanting a window on this one exterior wall. They were like, well, it just makes sense. Can't you just grab a window from this other lot? We're like, well, no, we have to submit all of that to permitting. It changes the framing of your home. And so just setting that expectation can be helpful. Then you're going to go in and you're going to make an exterior elevation selection. And elevation is just what you see from the street in essence. So there's going to be options that are included, and then there's going to be upgrades from there, as with every aspect of new construction. So your included version is always going to be completely vinyl or fiber cement all the way around. Your next step up is going to be something that has a slight accent of either stone or brick right around the base of the foundation at the front. You're then going to have another level up where it likely will go around the garage. Maybe it goes up even more, or maybe at the very top, maybe it's even the entire front is brick or entire area is stone. It also, as you will notice, pay attention, it will change the style of the front porch, for example. It might also change the way that the roof lines are and how bumped out different windows are. This one doesn't show too many, but occasionally you'll see one where it looks like this, and then you've got even another line or arbor kind of right there. And so a complete side note, but something that unfortunately I had to learn from personal experience, was the elevation can also slightly affect the potential interior room sizes. Now, it won't be too notable, but it will change. And unfortunately, there's no good way to find that information online. Any of these floor plans are going to give you the general size of a given room, but they won't say this is the size of bedroom 2 for elevation B, elevation D, elevation F. And so this happened to one of my clients. We toured some new construction for Dan Ryan up off of Forestville Road in Northeast Raleigh. Years and years ago, when I was first getting in the business, we toured a model home. They loved it. We picked a lot. We did all the things, and they get all the way towards closing, and we're walking through it, and they're like, this room isn't as big as it looked in the model home. And I'm like, what are you talking? We as agents, we walk through a million homes. I'm like, oh, will you show me what you're talking about? And they did. So we went back into the model home, and they were right. And so I touched base with the agent. I said, hey, what's going on with this? And she said, well, that elevation that they chose, the model home elevation, it's slightly bumped out. So that room is about 2 feet bigger over there. I said, well, how would we have known this? And she goes, well, it's on the blueprint. I'm like, the blueprint that's only on your desk and only in the box that's at the front of the property for permitting, right? So like, no way to know, but they don't care, right? And so just something to make sure that you note to your clients, because it can make a difference. Then we're going to do all of that. We're going to draft the entire contract, and then we're going to make selections that are a little more fun. These are going to be design selections. Now, the way that different builders do it is totally dependent on their style. Most of the time, what you are going to do is go to a design center. You'll normally draft the contract, you'll do all that. And then a week or so later, you'll go to a design center and pick out the flooring that you want, the cabinet color, the countertops, all of the things. Other builders might do it in the model home, either the same day as you write the contract, or they might have you come back to the model home later in the week to do it. There also will be other builders, kind of your lower end, more cost efficient ones, that have seen trends that clients tend to pull and recognize that clients can get a little overwhelmed by this. And just go ahead and do packages. And so they'll say, all right, well, in our experience, people tend to pick these colors together. So this is option 1. Or if you want white cabinets, and these are the ones that, and they'll have like 6 selection option packages that you can pick, where they've gone ahead and selected everything, but it's still whatever the client is deciding. So real quick, I'm going to hop back and forth for a second. One example of this is Smith Douglas. I'm just referencing them because I've had a few clients purchase homes from them, so I'm familiar with their website. But a few things to note. Like I mentioned, there's not much on MLS. And so very often what I will do is I will start by doing a search on MLS. I'm going to do what's pending and closed based on their criteria, and I'm going to make a list of those communities. I am then going to call that on-site builder and say, hey, my clients are interested in your community. This is their criteria and this is their price point. Can you tell me what you have available? And I'm going to go from there. Now, I also, though, like I mentioned before, can go on their website and do a little bit of homework. So as I'm getting that list of communities, I might then go on to their website and click through their floor plans before calling them and say, hey, you know, this is what they're interested in. From what I can find online, I think that these 2 plans are likely going to be the best bet for them. Do you agree? And do you have any opportunities available for that? So when you're on this site, for example, you can go in and see that information. Now, like you see here, it says 3 to 4 bedrooms. What we talked about before with those structural selections is why that is the case. So depending on the builder site, some of them have this type of availability, some of them don't. But what I like about ones that do is you can go in and you can click an interactive floor plan. So they'll have all the pictures. No, you don't need to know that. They'll have pictures, they'll have examples, but you can scroll on down, and like I had as a screenshot, you can click and say, okay, I want to add an island. Maybe I want to add a window in the powder room, a covered patio. I can add a bedroom. Now, if you add a bedroom downstairs, the reason it's so expensive, or anywhere, converting a loft to a bedroom, for example, but especially downstairs, going from a flex space to a bedroom, they are also adding a full bathroom. In their opinion, it's not really a bedroom unless there's a bathroom downstairs, because if you have someone who has limited availability to walking upstairs, for example, they can't really use that bedroom, because where are they going to go, right? So you can play around with it, kind of put that on the client, say, hey, before I talked with the builder, they do have these floor plans available. I think these are going to be your best bets. Here's the link to their website. Why don't you click around and make the selections that are most interesting to you? And let's print that off and bring it with us when we meet with the builder. Now, the other reason I wanted to touch base about this, though, is because a lot of these sites, they're getting to be a lot more of smart systems, excuse me. And so Lennar, I think, is a good example. Dan Ryan is also a good example, where you can go on their websites and call or do a little chat, but most of the time they have like an online call thing, and you can call one of their representatives. And I know a lot of times we don't want to do that, but they actually are very much in the know, and they have a lot of information on what's available, what inventory is. They might even be able to help you book that appointment. So feel free to start there. Don't be intimidated by that. Okay. Then once we make all of those selections, they're going to go ahead and start drafting up the contract. They are also going to put each and every selection that we have made into a document for us. Now, this can be very overwhelming. Who was it? Kim had mentioned wanting to know about documents. This is one of the ones that can be quite confusing when you're first getting into it. Now, granted, this isn't the contract. The contract is a world of its own. Honestly, you just have to kind of read through it and get a lay of the land. But this can be incredibly intimidating because what the selections pages do is they list any and every selection that is available to you, whether you have selected or not. And then if you have selected it, they will have a price next to it. So you will see the given line items. I have another one over here. Let me jump around. So you will see each of the available options with a price associated with it, which that doesn't make sense, but they'll add it in. And then you'll see if your client has selected it on the right-hand side, you will see the cost associated with it. So typically what you'll do is you'll meet with the builder and say, hey, this is what we're interested in. You'll make all of those selections. That is your dream scenario. And then you'll say, okay, how does that price look? And you're like, it looks good. In which case we keep on moving. Or we say, ooh, that's a little too high. In which case we can go down this and say, all right, well, our biggest cost right now is that covered porch. Is that something that's really important to you? Or maybe you're only a few $1,000s over, right? We can kind of make some edits from there. But I always like to make the recommendation, let's start with your dream scenario. We can always take things off if needed, but let's see if it works for you. Now, and I'm going to spend a little more time going into each of those details in just a moment, but I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the other side of things, the inventory homes. This is what Amy has mentioned she's more familiar with, right? The builder has picked the floor plan, they've picked the lot, they've picked the selections, they've put all of that together and they have provided a price. And that price is the price you pay. It's not, there's no additional add-ons. It is what it is, which is why they are more available or open to listing those on MLS. And those are just simple. Those are simple. You say that that's what you want. They go ahead and draft everything up. You likely will still have a copy of all of those documents in there because they want to show both for their sake and for the client's sake and for the builder's sake what has been selected so that when they're building it, they make sure everything makes it into the home and that you know what you're getting. But all of that is lumped into the price. And these are often on MLS. Inventory homes, real quick, let's just talk about them for a moment. They do them for a number of reasons. Some builders are more cost efficient than others, and simply this is their way of doing things. They don't want to wait for clients to make decisions. They don't want to be sitting on lots or funding new model homes or people sitting on site. They just build it. If you want it, great. You tell us what you want. 127 Homes or Weston Homes, those are great examples of those builders. They're amazing price points. They only have a few styles of homes. You kind of tend to see them. So after you've shown a few of them or worked with a few of them, if you go into a new community and you see that same floor plan, you'll start to say, oh, yep, I know that builder, right? The other thing might be, it could be a situation where you're in COVID times and the supplies are incredibly limited and they don't want to be tethered to some selection that the client has made, like some sort of cabinet color, and then they can't get that supply in stock. And then they're waiting even longer and keeping this product on their books for longer than they need based on some small item. And so they might just go ahead and start making these selections because they know what they have access to. Or it could be a situation where, you know, it's a townhome community and they have a building of 4 properties and 3 of them have sold and they're waiting on this one. And they just want to go ahead and get started building. So they might make this 4th one an inventory home so that they're not holding everything else up, right? It just helps kind of get things going. So it can happen for a number of reasons. The other option though is, like I said, the builder has made all of those selections, but they're far enough back from the closing timeline that you might have the option to make certain selections. And so taking a step back, this is the case with any situation, but especially inventory homes. When we're talking about listing these properties, when it comes to new construction, there is no requirement or no benchmark for when they have to do that or what is standard. They can list it when it's dirt. They can list it when it's at framing, or they can list it right before it's ready to close. There's no standard for that. So they absolutely can go ahead and, like I used in that last example, maybe they have this townhome community and they've gone ahead and made the selection just for the sake of getting it ready and getting it through permitting. But they aren't really wanting to do that. They don't have a strong opinion about it. They just needed to get it going. Some other client comes in and says, hey, I want that, but I don't really like that cabinet color. Do I have the option to make that change? In which case, you know, if it's pre-drywall, they might have that option. In essence, this will never truly be marketed. This is simply a question that you are asking. So if you have a client that's looking at inventory homes, or they're just looking at new construction in general, and you start to see an inventory option that might be available to them, that's a question to ask the builder is, hey, by the way, would they have an option to make any selections or any edits to selections if they wanted to? Just asking that proactively. A lot of it just has to do with, have they ordered the materials yet? And has it come in? If it has, you're locked in. But if it's dirt or just past dirt, you might have this as an option. There might be a cost associated with it, but it could be an option. Again, these are non-structural items though. Nothing that is related to permitting. All right, let's talk about luxury homes real quick, or custom builds. As with all aspects of new construction, you've got a ton of options. Most of the time though, even with luxury, you're going to have a given community that you're working within. You've got floor plans that you have available. They might just have more availability to making customizable options and updates to it. So if you wanted to completely change a given room or add a bathroom, they might be more open to doing that. But in general, they're sticking with their floor plan. The main thing that you'll see in luxury though is instead of going to a design center, they will send you to a number of design partners, like a lighting vendor. They'll send you to a cabinet vendor. They'll send you to a granite company. And for each of those, you will have a budget to work with. And so they'll say, all right, we've budgeted $20,000 for lights. Feel free to make any selections within that, and that'll be included in your price. Anything above and beyond that, you have to pay for. You do have the option kind of on Carrie's side of things to go ahead and find your own lot and then completely find a custom builder or build on that lot. That, in my opinion, is kind of a world of its own for a number of reasons. One, because of the closing situation, you do have to purchase the lot very often, purchase the lot, close on that, and then work with the builder and fund the building process. And so when you do that, the loan process can be a little tricky. You can do situations where they're lumped together, but not all lenders do it. And when it comes to lots, I'm sure Carrie kind of is, but you have to be really careful about making sure that the property that you are purchasing can accommodate what your end goal is. Is it hooked up to utilities yet? Can it be? Is there water, sewer, electric nearby? Is it going to be septic? Can it perk for what you need? Meaning, if it is septic, how many bedrooms can it be? And that was just never my strength, so I never focused on that. But just know that there's a lot more that goes into play than what people think. And so adding a completely new septic system can be, $50,000, $80,000. It just depends on the situation. And so you're likely not getting a deal by picking your own lot. There are builders that do that though. I think Drees Homes is a good example of it. Drees has a pick your own lot program. And so you pick the lot and then you pick a floor, you find any lot that you want, and then you pick one of their floor plans and they'll build on it. The caveat being that a lot of people don't recognize is when you do that, and yes, you do kind of a standard loan process, so you're not having to do that double closing, which is nice, but they are purchasing the lot and then they are building on it, and then you are buying the end product from them. So if anything happens, they own that lot that you wanted, understandably, because they're fronting all the costs, but just things to note. And finding the right lot can be very difficult. It's not something that we have a lot of knowledge on necessarily if we're in the resale or just kind of standard residential world. There are some on MLS that you can find, but kind of my general thought process and what I say to clients is there's a lot of growth in our area and there's a lot of builders in here. And so if there's a really good lot or some really good lots available, they've likely been scooped up. And so the ones that you're going to be seeing on MLS are kind of those one-off situations. We've also have all of those costs that I talked about, not to mention the potential zoning questions that we have, and can we even build what we want, where we want. All right, now let's talk about the construction process. I mentioned this slightly, but when we're talking about finding new construction, this is where it gets really difficult. In my opinion, this is one of the best ways that we add value to our clients. This is where we really kind of prove our worth in essence. It is also one of those places that can be very hard to set expectations for our clients and manage what they are seeing out and about, right? They are out driving around and they're making all these notes, right? Tell them to take a quick pause. I'm going to do some research on my end. I'm going to take all of this information and then you go into MLS. We're going to treat it like we normally would. Again, we're doing low thresholds. If they want a 4-bedroom, I'm putting in 3. If they want 2,400 square feet, I'm putting in 2,200 because we might be able to do a bump out of the living room and make it bigger, for example. So I'm going to do all of those searches. I'm going to do pending and closed, also active, but mainly pending and closed over the past little bit. And I'm going to see what communities they have. I'm then going to look on the builder websites and look at the floor plans that fit their needs. I'm going to make a list of those floor plans. I'm then going to call either that website for the builder, or most of the time I'm going to be calling the on-site agent for the builder and asking them those questions. Hey, I have a client that's interested in this criteria. It looks like your neighborhood would fit their needs. This is the floor plan or floor plans I think that that would fit their needs based on what I'm seeing. Would you agree? Are there any other floor plans that might fit those needs based on what I've told you that I should consider to them? Okay, can you tell me what your current prices are? What are the prices for those floor plans? What are your current prices for lots in terms of a range? And how many lots do you have available? Are you going to have any additional releases or any additional phases coming soon? Is there anything else we should know? Do you have a model home on site? Do you have any of these floor plans that we've talked about, either as a model in this community or in another community that we could walk through? Or is there one under construction for another client that we could walk through within your neighborhood? I then will likely drive the area and just kind of get a lay of the land. Depends on how well I know the client, what type of time constraint we're on. The other thing that I really want to make sure that I am doing while I am on the phone with these people is I am registering my client with the builder and with the neighborhood. Builders love to cut us out of a deal, and clients don't necessarily recognize why they need to be represented on the buy side. And so when you're speaking with them, make sure that you are giving them your client's name, phone number, and email, and registering them to you as the agent. Because if that client, you send them, what I'll typically do is I'll do all of this, I'll make my list, and then I will send my clients either one massive email, or depending on how many communities kind of fit their needs, I might send them one email per community. I will say I kind of always have done the most. So do what feels scalable and sustainable to you. But what I would do is send them an email and say, here's the details on this community. This is when they have stuff coming up. These are the floor plans I think you'd like. Here are some links, right? Naturally, this is a big decision. They're getting really excited. They're likely then going to go drive that community. You don't want them to be walking into that neighborhood without you, and you definitely don't want them walking into that neighborhood without them being registered. Because if they go in first without either of those things, but definitely before registering, then the builder can say you were not the procuring cause. They didn't come in here with you and you never claimed them. Sorry. And it doesn't matter. It does not matter if you have buyer agency signed. They can cut you out. And then if you want to get paid or you want to be included, it is up to your buyer to include you. So I don't want to scare people, but it is something to just be cautious of. On a total side note, but on this topic, if you start hearing that your clients are interested in new construction, I would create an email template that is your expectations for how we're going to work together with new construction. Here are your buyer rules for new construction. Always let me know when you're going to a community. Please don't go without me if at all possible. I will always try to make myself available or have another agent meet you there. I want to make sure I am hearing the same thing you are hearing. And I want to make sure that I can represent you accordingly. Those new construction agents are incredibly kind. They're very good at their job and they mean well. However, they talk to a lot of people. And so if they say something to you and I'm not there, and then something changes down the road, I have no way to back you up or guarantee that I know what they said. And I'm not really able to fight for you in that regard. So whatever that is, maybe just make it a part of your process to send them some expectations. Okay. Now, when we're touring new construction, you kind of heard me say this. a minute ago when I was asking those questions. But the hard part with it is you're not always going to have something to walk through. Surprise, surprise, when someone's buying one of the most expensive things they're ever going to purchase, they want to know what they're getting. They don't want to just buy it off of pictures and hope they understand the floor plan. So we need to be understanding what their options are. Like we said, do they have a model home? Can we tour this anywhere? You need to set the expectation with your client that, you know, I would love to have a situation where you go into a neighborhood and the first 10 houses are all of their floor plans they have available and you can walk through them. Your best option for something similar to that is going to be like a Del Webb community. Normally the 55 plus ones have like 4 floor plans kind of to that, but most of the time you've got 1 or 2 models. Now, that said, most builders will have a number of communities throughout the triangle area. And so you can always say, all right, well, do you have this in any other community? And setting the expectation with your client. We might do some drive-in. We might need to go to another community to see that house that you're interested in. So just kind of soak it in and picture it on that lot and in that community over there. Again, like I mentioned before, even if they don't, another buyer client may have selected that floor plan, in which case, can we walk through it while it's under construction? You do need to prepare your clients that, you know, it's pre-drywall, so it's just studs. Between you and me, it is very hard for clients to picture homes when they're in studs. It looks dramatically different once the walls are up, and it honestly looks a lot bigger once the drywall is up, but it's definitely better than just pictures and just a floor plan, so definitely make the ask. Also ask them if there's anyone that's going to be available to tour with you while you're on site. 2 things to note here. 1, even if they don't have the floor plan that you're interested in, absolutely go to the model home, because we want to see the way that they construct the home. We want to see what those finishes look like. We want to see how well they've maintained it. We also can then kind of walk through some of the others and see how we feel about it, even if they're not the floor plan, because the way that they build one home is going to say a lot about how they're going to build your home. And so one of the things that people will notice, for example, is the trim around windows. Smith Douglas is a great example of that. A lot of lower priced builders are, where now they're just doing drywall all the way around, and that's that. They don't even have the little base detail. Now, the other builders might have full trim all the way around the window. Stuff like that is going to make a big difference in what your clients see. And it's just nice to point out to them so you set the expectation. It's also nice to have someone there to walk you through it, because they can point out what's an upgrade and what your options are in your room, especially in the model home. Prepare them that they're going to see a ton of things. This is going to be the most expensive house in the neighborhood. They're going to have selections in here that might not even be available to you, like that accent wall that you see, or these statement tiles. But you also can have bigger rooms in there. So they might have selected to bump out the living room or to make this other addition. And so having the on-site agent there to walk through it with you to say, all right, this looks, just know that this was an upgrade, or this is kind of above and beyond an upgrade. Your standard room is going to be here. And they'll kind of stand in the room and put their arms on and say, picture this. If you go with their standard, then these 3 feet behind me don't exist. Sometimes I will drive it though, as well. And again, this is where you need to manage your time and see what's realistic to you, but recognize that when you're with clients, things are going to take a little bit longer. And so especially if you know your clients really well and you know their criteria, I would start by doing all the things I mentioned, but then driving some of those communities and seeing if you can kind of weed some things out, or at a minimum, doing a practice run of a given tour. Be like, all right, we're going to go here and we're going to go into the model home. And then we're going to go to this community and we're going to walk through these 3 floor plans. That's the other thing. When we're talking about touring the properties, if it is a community that is under construction, it can be hard to find the houses and we need to know how to access them. So instead of having addresses, they're going to have lot numbers. And so when you're talking to the on-site agent, and they'll say, all right, well, we don't have any of those in this neighborhood, but if you go to this neighborhood in Fuquay, they will have them. Lots 34, 37, and 25 are the ones that you're interested in. So make sure you write that down and that you have a little map that you've circled where they are I would recommend just going in advance and walking those and getting a feel for where they are. So you don't have the clients behind you while you're just slowly driving through the entire neighborhood trying to read. Now, where you're going to find that information is on the box, the permit box that's going to be in the driveway or in the front yard of any given house. Sometimes they will write out what floor plan it is, but at a minimum, they will have the lot number. And so you can see that there. So if you're going through it and you're like, oh, that one actually, it looks like that one's the floor plan that we want. She didn't mention that one, but maybe we should pop in. Most of the time, they do not lock the properties until appliances have been installed, but make sure you're asking, how will we have access to the home? Because especially if there's no one on site, you don't want to be driving all the way out there and then not be able to get in. So make sure you've got an idea. Any questions so far? All right, talking about a lot. Thanks for hanging in there. I know I mentioned this, but you really don't want them going without you. Regardless, no matter how much we educate them, if they are looking at new construction, give them a stack of cards, include that in the email that you're sending out as one of their buyer rules. Please don't go without me. But if you do, you've got to give them one of my cards. So make sure you give them a little pile of them. And then, like I said, register in advance just in case. All right, a few things to note. As with resale, the seller pays commissions. It depends on the builder what those are. During COVID, when there were a ton of buyers and not much inventory, those commissions were low. I know we as agents aren't supposed to talk about typical, right? But let's just be real. In general, we used to see new construction averaging about 2.5% commission to the buy side pre-COVID. During that time where there was very limited inventory, we saw those commissions drop down to 2%. Some of them I saw a flat fee of like $4,000 for a house where that would have equaled 1% commission. And so just know that the builder is gonna have their prices, and you can try to negotiate, depends on the situation. I've had one agent have success in negotiating that commission up, but it's hard to do because it's a corporate level thing. It's not up to the one-site agent. And so just make sure, again, that's an expectation you're setting with the client. In general, the compensation that I receive, you can put it on the firm if you want to. The compensation that my firm expects is 2.5% for new construction. So I will always let you know what the builder is paying, but I just need you to know that if it's below that, it will be up to you as the buyer to make up that difference. Is that something you're comfortable with? And it's up to you as the agent as whether you do that. If it's down at 2%, I don't know if I would, but if it's equaling 1%, I absolutely am, especially if this contract is going to take 8 months to close. I'm not free, right? Like, value your time, set those expectations. It can be a little uncomfortable, but make sure they know. Also, make sure they know they're not going to get a deal, a quote unquote deal, by not working with an agent. They have already buffered in those commissions. And so honestly, if they aren't working with an agent, the one-side agent might get a bonus. They might not, but they definitely aren't reducing the buyer agent commission or the buyer's purchase price or closing costs just because they're not paying an agent. Make sure your client knows that. And make sure that they know that the on-site agent works for the builder. They're incredibly kind. They are great at educating us, but they are here to work for the builder. And so if anything comes up, they're going to side with the builder. And when it comes to communication, they're going to side with the builder. So just make sure they know that. Kim, what do you have?
In my experience, I've learned that it's best to make sure if you're pulling the house out of MLS and there's details as it relates to the commission, it's better to print that out and have your copy because they've been known to change and switch that up. So you may start seeing a certain percentage for commission or bonus. And then after you've gone in and you've had your client to look at it, you go back into MLS and you see something different. So it's always best to print that out initially before you even go out to look and make sure you.
Sorry. I couldn't agree more. Yes. Totally right. Because as agents, MLS is seen as part of a contract. But to your point, Kim, they have done that. They can absolutely do that. So download it and put it in .loop, definitely just keep a record of the file. Thank you for saying that. Absolutely. Anything else you wanted to add on that note?
No, but you're welcome.
Cool. Oh, yeah, man. All right. Then we're going to meet with the builder. We're going to make a plan. We might be doing one visit. We might be doing a whole day of tours, whatever the case may be. I would recommend setting an appointment with the builder so that you know that you're going to have time to talk to them. If you just walk in, you don't know if they're going to be with another client, you don't know what's available. So make sure you set that appointment with them. And then you're going to go into a situation that looks like this. Normally it's the garage of the given house. And they normally turn that into their sales center and then convert it back to a garage right before they sell the model home. But they're going to go over all of those things that we talked about. They're going to tell you what's available in terms of lots, floor plans, potential selections. One of the things that I really like to talk about when I'm with them though, and they will have a whole packet to give your clients normally, what are the included features? These are going to be kind of your standards regardless of whatever you pick. So the window trim, for example, and things of that sort. They're also going to talk about the contract. They'll talk about the timeline and the process. It's just kind of an added layer of support. Now, that said, I would definitely recommend doing what I said at the beginning of this call and educating them in advance, doing a little mini buyer consult for new construction specifically, and then going to the on-site agent. And then that way they're hearing it for a second time, but that you were the one that truly added the value, and then they're just supporting it. But it's nice to have people hear things a number of times from other people. But normally they have a little monitor up so they can kind of show you like, these are the lots that are available. We've got these coming soon. Also, these people unfortunately just terminated. This lot will be coming back. They'll have floor plan printouts, and then they will either go with you or they'll tell you where to go and say, come back when you're done and let me know your thoughts on these homes. Now, when it comes to negotiations, I know one of you all had mentioned this. I know Kim had kind of mentioned it. Who else? Yeah. But the main things that you will see, seller paid closing cost, easiest one to get. If you are using their preferred lender and attorney, they will likely have some sort of incentive for you. A few things to keep in mind here. One, nothing is free, right? So if they are getting they're getting $4,500 in closing costs from the preferred lender. Absolutely, definitely still shop your options with your preferred lender as an agent or whatever lender they've talked to when maybe they were looking at resale before they went new construction, right? Compare apples to apples. What was the rate that you were getting with that other lender? Yeah, you're not getting closing costs, but what was the rate? And what were your potential costs to close for that lender? Okay, if we look at the builder's lender, what is my rate? And what are those closing costs? Because you definitely are paying for something somewhere. Now, because the builder sends them so much volume, they likely are giving some of it as part of just a reduction in whatever the lender is getting. But in general, your rate might be slightly higher or you're going to be paying for something. So make sure you recognize that. I also like to respect relationships. I would hope that someone would do this for me. And so if I have a client that's been talking with a lender, especially if they've been working with them for a long time and they're finally qualified, and then they decide to go look at new construction, give that lender an opportunity to match what the builder is doing. Because we already have this relationship. We know this lender well. We know how they operate and they've put in some work. I would hope that someone would do that for me. And they might be able to match it. Or they're going to be able to say, well, I mean, I can't match it, but I can tell you that this is where you're paying for it. So if it's $2,500, your lender might be able to match it. If it's above that, if it's 3, 4, definitely if it's 7, your other lender isn't going to be able to match it, but definitely still have that conversation with them. Ask them if there's any other incentives. Are there any agent bonuses? If you see one that's advertised, think about it. You know, it's up to you, but you might mention it to your client. Hey, by the way, this one community is doing an agent bonus. If you went here, I'd be more than happy to split that with you and give you half of it at closing. You know, I don't know. You weren't going to get it otherwise, right? Food for thought. One of the easiest asks is blinds. That's one of the most common concessions that I see outside of costs. Blinds are expensive. And they take a while to get in. They're like $40 a window. You have to schedule the install. In my opinion, having those installed before you close is amazing. And you can't do that if you do it through another vendor. So if the builder can do it, that's great, because then, you know, you're not changing clothes in some random closet. right? You can actually know that your neighbors aren't looking in the windows as soon as you move in. The other thing that I've seen occasionally are fridges. On that note, if they're not an incentive, I wouldn't get them. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Those are kind of your most common ones, but you can always ask. There's certain things that your clients want, make the ask. The other thing is, especially in the higher price points, especially where they're giving a certain budget for certain items. So like I was mentioning, they'll send you to the lighting center for $20,000 of selections, see if you can bump that up to $30,000 in terms of a credit. See if you can get some credits there in terms of selections, for example. Now, this is something I want to kind of focus on because I've actually had a few calls about this lately with some of my agents. If you've never worked new construction before, this can be a little surprising in that the builder is the one that drafts up the contract, and it is incredibly long. It'll be 40, 60, sometimes 80 pages. It's daunting. Definitely read through it for your client. Make sure your client reads through it. But the builder is going to be the one that drafts it. And I know that can be intimidating because they're going to ask you, what's your client's name? What's their email address? So just know that they'll draft it up. Now, it likely will take them some time because it is so long and they are on site and they're dealing with other people coming in and asking questions and they're trying to sell other houses. And so very often they'll say, okay, I'm going to draft that up. I'll get it to you tonight. This is one of the places where new construction is different from resale in that when they say it's yours, it's pretty much yours. They're not trying to work double and try to sell the same lot, right? If they've sold that one, they're going to tell people like, that one's about to go under contract, so I can't sell you that one, but I can sell you this one, right? You're pretty good to go when the builder says it. So they'll take some time to draft it and then they will send it out. Now, chain of command is important here as well. Most builders use DocuSign, and DocuSign, unlike Dotloop, where Dotloop sends everything out to all people at the same time, DocuSign sends it out in a chain of command order. So normally you as the agent will get it first. And normally you have to sign somewhere saying what brokerage you're with, confirming your address and contact information, and confirming the commission that you're getting. So to Kim's point, be sure to check that. If there's any bonuses or anything that are supposed to be in there, make sure that you tell them before you sign that contract. But know that you have to sign that and then it will go to your client. So if you're out and about and you see that come through on a Saturday and you're out shopping, you're like, oh, well, like the client will sign it. I'll take a look in a second. They already know what to expect. Nope. Make sure you sign it because it's waiting on you before it can go to the client. Now, if you have any questions, understandably, about that contract, I would recommend saying, hey, I know you're going to draft everything up, but before before we get that, in the meantime, can you just send us a blank copy of the contract so we can just look it over? I know it's going to be long. We just want to take a look. One of the most common things to note is, on a totally unrelated note, but one of the things that you will see in the contract, well, two. One, contingencies. This is one of those expectations and one of those conversations that you have to just be like, I know builders are crazy. I don't know why this is the case, but I just need you to know it. If you are doing a contingent sale, builders will require that you sell your property within 30 days of going under contract. Oh my gosh, but my house isn't going to be ready for 8 months. I know. Where are you going to go if that's the case? Can you stay with family or friends? Will we need to do a short-term rental? But I don't know why that's what they require, because they're fronting so much cost to get something built. They don't want to wait until we're close to this timeline and then they don't know if your home is going to sell and then all of a sudden the sale doesn't work. So they want to cover their bases and make sure you sell your house up front. So is there a way that we can do this non-contingent? Or if we need to do it as a contingent sale, we need to make sure that we're on the same page and understanding that. And ask if it is going to be a contingent sale, we need to make sure we understand, does it need to go under contract within 30 days or does it have to close within 30 days? Normally it's under contract, but make sure you make that ask. The other thing to note, delays in construction. The builder has all the grace in the world and too bad for you. Deal with it, like they can deal with supply chain issues or permitting can take forever and they can quote you 6 months build time and all of a sudden it's 9 months. Or what happened to me when I had some people under contract around the COVID time. It was going to be 9 months to a year. It ended up being 1.5 years. A dramatic difference. Even though they extend who knows how many times without fail, without repercussion. If we as the buyer miss closing, they can charge us per day. So we need to be doing everything we can do to match their timeline to the best of our ability. Also know that it will be very hard for us to control our rate or predict what that will be. If we are buying new construction and you're concerned about the rate, our best bet is going to be to buy an inventory home. If we are doing pre-sale, we are at the mercy of what those rates are. And especially with the way that rates are going now, we need to be buying well below our price point. Because if we are qualifying for something right now, or at the top of our budget, and then 9 months down the road, when we go to close, rates are 1% higher, you might not qualify anymore, you know, and that's your house. People think of it that way, understandably. They've made all these decisions. They're really excited about it. And so we need to make sure that we're buffering that in and that they recognize it, because you cannot lock your rate in until normally 30 to 60 days out from closing. Occasionally you can buy an extended rate lock, but even that's 90 days or something. You aren't going to be able to buy a rate for or lock one in 9 months out. So they need to understand that. All right, now, once they've drafted everything up, you're going to pay your builder deposit. So normally what's going to happen is you go in, maybe you come back a second time, or maybe you say yes on the spot. Regardless, bring your checkbook. That's another thing. Set expectation with your clients, and that expectation email, add it to the list. Bring your checkbook when we go to new construction, because we're going to go ahead and give them that check. Now, they won't deposit it until all parties have signed the contract, but they'll keep that check in their desk drawer, and that's going to be kind of what we use. We don't typically wait until everyone is signed to give it. We typically give it up front. Additionally, though, kind of on that note, they do have a 30-day contingency stipulation for lending typically. So once you go under contract, within 30 days, you'll have to get conditional approval from the lender, which I know seems silly because it's not going to be ready for who knows how long. But again, if they're fronting all this cost, they want to make sure that you are really good to go, even if you've been fully pre-approved. So make sure you know that, put it in your calendar for 30 days, you know, put 30-day mark, but also put a reminder like 10 days before that to make sure you check in with your lender to say, hey, how's that conditional approval coming for the builder? One thing to note, builder signatures will take some time. It will take them some time to draft it, but then it'll also take them some time to sign it, because it is not the on-site agent that is signing it, it is upper management. And so they kind of do that in bulk. And so especially if you do it over the weekend, just know you're going to get builder signatures likely on a Monday or Tuesday. You're going to get them a few days out, and that's okay. Unlike resale, I mean, granted, nothing's done until it's done, but unlike resale, it's a lot more like once you've signed, you're good to go. They're going to get that back to you. Any questions about any of this? I know there's a lot of random little caveats here, but it's important stuff. And to Allison's point on the front end, like these are the comments and expectations that are really going to add value to our clients. Because if they don't know these things, and to Amy's point, if you don't know that you're going to have to sell your house in 30 days and you go under contract, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, so now I need to figure out housing for 7 months. And I've got 2 kids and a dog. Like my family's not going to want me to stay with them for that long, right? Like make sure you know these things and say it to the client. Building can take some time, especially if you're doing a pre-construction or a pre-sale home. It's going to take anywhere from 6 to 12 months, sometimes even longer. And then, like I mentioned, you won't be able to lock your rate for a while. Also know that once you go under contract, very often it will stay sitting at dirt for a month or 2. Why? Because they're submitting it to permitting through the county. And if this is a brand new community, they might not have even done that yet. They might still be waiting on the community's utilities to be connected and for the permitting for the entire neighborhood as a whole for electrical and plumbing to be approved before they can even submit building permits. And so just know if they're driving through and they're like, nothing has happened yet. I know we're at their mercy, but they'll do it eventually, right? They've got a contract, but it'll just take some time. We're then going to go to our potential design meeting if we've purchased a pre-sale or if we've got some options. Make sure you understand how the builder does this. If we've got some amount that we're trying to meet, you can make $20,000 in selections total. Or, you know, everything is base and then anything above that is something you pay for. Make sure you understand that if you're making selections that are above what is standard, okay, let me take a step back. When we're making selections for a new construction home, there's always going to be things that are included. Those are $0 amounts. examples of those are going to be dark cabinets, like your wood dark cabinets, normally 2 colors, like that medium wood and dark wood. That's gonna be your included. You have like your very base level granite included. Anything above that is level 1, level 2, level 3. Each of those has a tier in pricing. So as you get up, you're going to have different wood color. You might have a really light wood color. Then you're going to have some painted cabinet colors. And then your highest level is likely going to be your white painted cabinets because they require the most paint, things like that. And so make sure your clients know that, and know that typically they'll buffer all of that into the purchase price, but after it gets above a certain amount, they'll say, okay, well, you've got this much to pay that you can do that's included, or, you know, you've got up to this much that will add to the purchase price, but above that amount, we will require that you either pay that difference completely at the time of your design meeting, or pay half of it at your design meeting and the other half at closing. So make sure your client knows that. And again, to bring their checkbook with them. Yes, Kim.
I have a question about that. So typically for, let's just say, cabinet design, if the builder is offering 3 different options for cabinet design, have you ever run into a situation where the particular, like say for instance, my client is interested in white cabinets, but she wants it in a particular floor plan. Have you ever run into a situation where they tell you a particular cabinet color or maybe granite or whatever is not offered in a certain floor plan?
No.
I thought that was really peculiar.
Yeah, that is very weird. That is very weird. I
Okay.
mean, my only thought would be maybe it has to do with like, I don't know, that corner cabinet isn't available in stock, and so we just want to avoid. I don't know. That's very weird. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I thought that was peculiar. Okay. I just wanted to ask you just to see if that had ever been an experience of yours, or
Yeah.
had you heard of it before?
No, I'm sorry. Interesting. Very interesting. They are a little peculiar. Now, that said, I have run into situations where they'll say like, oh yeah, like this color just isn't available at all. But normally it's a certain color or style. And they'll say, well, like, you know, we have 2 cabinet styles. One is kind of your standard that has like a little ridge on it. And then the other is going to be your shaker, which is just kind of flat with the square surround. And so they might say, your client might say, oh, I like that one. We'll be like, well, that's not included. We've got, these are your 2 options, you know, but in terms of color specifically, I haven't heard that. That said, design appointments, in my opinion, are an amazing way to add value as an agent. I tell them I'm going to take copious notes. Don't mind me. I'm just writing away, or bring your computer. Also, bring your phone and take a million pictures. When I go into that design appointment, I'll just bring my notebook, and every single thing that they say, I'm writing down. So I'm going to say like cabinet, they selected this color, this style, any other detail. I'm then going to take a picture of the front, and I'm going to take a picture of the back, because the back will say the color name, the brand, all of those details that we're talking about. I'm going to make a whole list. Then as they make changes to their decisions, because they will, I'm going to cross through that and say, changed to X, Y, and Z, take a new picture. They change it back, I'm making a note. Why? Because this process takes forever. And so understandably, it's hard to remember everything. And so if we get down the road and we're 8 months later, they're walking through their home and they're like, I didn't make that decision. You can go back in your notes and say, well, I hear you. You did change it at one point, but we ended up going back, and I have it in my notes. And we're like, oh man, I forgot I did that, right? Like just having a paper trail of all of those things can be very helpful. And to that point, I kind of go above and beyond when it comes to this. This is where I really get specific. And so at a minimum, I'm doing those notes. Typically though, I am also, let me close these out. I'm also doing something like this when it's all said and done. I'm going to make a little spreadsheet and just do it as a PDF where I say, all right, and I'll break it down by room, make it really simple for them. In the owner's bedroom, this is lighting, you get it. I'm doing that for every single thing. And you'll see level 3 included, right? Every single detail. And I'm just adding it to my loop. Now, these files will typically be kind of large, which is why this one, for example, it says selections for the owner's bath. And then I'll have another one for kitchen, just because these files can be pretty large. But I do this and I send it to them because I want them to be able to focus on the fun part. of making all these decisions and not feel like they have to also remember everything. And so I'm going to do all of these notes. Now, when we're in here, the designers are really good about going through their process. And so as they do things, they'll pull it out and lay it on a table. And then, so as you pick your cabinets, they'll lay the little sample cabinet on the table, and then they'll lay the countertop on top of it, and all of these things. So you kind of see how it will all flow together. They do a really good job of that. Now, when we're in here, another way to really add value, this is something I'll send them later. I'll be like, don't mind me, I'm going to do all this. The other thing though, is to know, and this just comes with experience, to know what is worth purchasing from the builder and what is not. What's a good example of this? One of the ones that I ran into when I was helping some clients a few years ago, they wanted to get some floodlights outside. And they were like, oh yeah, you can do that, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, oh, well, does it have the sensor? And they're like, no, it's this switch inside. And I could understand what the client was saying, but the design rep just wasn't picking up on it. Is they wanted something that would turn on if someone walked by or something went through their yard. And so they didn't want to just leave that on. And so that was going to be like $60 or something. I was like, and so I just looked it up real quick. I had a feeling, but I looked it up real quick. I'm like, oh, you can get one of those. It's battery powered for $30. I don't remember if that was cost, but just real quick, like, oh, you can get that. Or if they're thinking, oh, I might buy the fridge through the builder. Wait a minute. I understand absolutely wanting that in your house as soon as you close, understandably, but do you want to be paying interest on a fridge for 30 years? Because it seems like a low cost, but just think about that for a second. The other thing is lighting. Typically, unless you're going kind of the luxury route, typically lighting comes in packages. And so your lighting package, this is just a screenshot from the lighting package. Each lighting package is like, all right, well, the owner's bath is going to have these 3, guest bath is going to have these 2, the dining room light's going to be this, and that is what it is. And so if your client is very specific on what they want for the dining room light, and they're like, oh, well, only this package has it, I don't really care about these other things, but I want that light, right? Tell them, wait, if you have the intention to make a lot of lighting updates, go with the bare minimum package for the builder. Make sure you have the wiring, but go with the lowest package and just update those. And that way you can kind of cherry pick what you want, and you can really make sure that you get the lighting fixture you want. That one might even just be the closest thing to what you want, but not even your dream scenario. So just kind of feeling those types of things out can be very helpful to your clients. And it can be a great way to help save them money. Now, when we're in there, we are also, well, I guess this is something that you typically, so let me take a step back. Wiring is something that's going to happen at the initial contract meeting. So you will get a copy of something like this either at that point or during the design meeting when they double check. Do you want a ceiling fan? It might be pre-wired, but we can install one, for instance. So making sure your clients understand where each thing's good, but you'll have some sort of layout like this that will show where everything is going to go, or you should. And so as you're going through, make sure you're adding these to your notes of, for example, where is the data cable going to be? Normally they'll say, all right, you've got 2 data cables that are included, and then we've got options where you can add those. And so if they're like, okay, well, this is where I'd put my TV. So I want a data cable here, and then I want one in the owner's bedroom. I want it on this wall. Make sure you're making a note of those details. Also, I want to be making a note of what the flooring is going to be in each area. Typically, this is something that's done at the design appointment. This flooring is going to be one of your biggest costs. Normally, what's included is going to be EVP or laminate vinyl plank, LVP, in the entry and in the kitchen. Above and beyond that, it'll be carpet everywhere else, for the most part. And so you can upgrade per room, or you can do like the entire downstairs is going to be LVP. And so they can price everything out. And same thing as what we did at the initial contract, do your dream scenario, and then we can work backwards from there if needed. But make sure you are making a note of this. And this should be a part of every contract, but make sure you are very clear, especially if you are doing a combination of LVP and carpet. Make sure you understand where the flooring break is. I had a situation, fortunately, with Smith Douglas Homes, where a client was purchasing a property and it had like the flooring break, let's just say, was supposed to be from this corner to this corner, right? And it was something that we both knew, they had signed off on. And then we walk in the home and all of a sudden the flooring break is here, where it's going from one corner to the island. it's not quite the same situation, but pretty close, where you're like, what? I'm now going to have carpet right under the island. I mean, I kind of get it, but not really, like I get that that's where in that case, the living room kind of backed up to the kitchen. We're like, that's not what we talked about. And they're like, oh, well, we changed the flooring breaks halfway through the community because it's just what the builder needed to do. Well, I'm sorry, that wasn't a part of our contract. And actually I was able to prove that we had discussed X, Y, and Z, and like we were able to get it. But this is why we document everything, because even when something has been said, it is hard to fight for your clients. And so the more we can document, the better. And again, it doesn't mean anything against the on-site agent. It just means that they talk to a million people and it's hard for them to remember what they've said to every person. Another example that I had was I had some clients who had purchased, it was another Smith Douglas, and with handrails, let's say like right here, for example, your base level is going to be a knee wall, or that half wall that's drywall. Your upgrade from there is going to be wood spindles. And then your upgrade from there is going to be wrought iron. And so we went in the home and we had selected the knee wall because that was the only option we talked about. And then they started walking through all the other properties nearby and we're like, hey, these people have this. They're like, we weren't given that as an option. And it's like 7 months later. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I have no idea if we were given that option or not. I don't remember if that was, but these people had purchased a number of new construction homes. And she was like, no, Kate, I know I would have remembered that because I absolutely would have selected it if they'd said it. I was like, well, let me look. And I went through all of my notes and I found every single line item related to the stairwell and I didn't have a single note about that selection. And so I pretty well was sure that we had not talked about it, and I pushed and pushed and I could not get it changed. And so just know that the more we can document, the better. And also just, builders can, once something's done, it's a lot harder to get them to undo it. So just document. And then we wait for them to do all of those things. Now, as we make those selections, they're going to send you an updated version of that selection sheet that I showed you on the front end, where it will look something like this. They'll send an updated version of this with new line items specific to the design options we've made and the prices associated with it. And then we're going to wait, and they're going to submit everything to permitting. They're going to get their ground ready. They're going to wait for materials to be ordered. And then we're going to do what's called a pre-construction meeting. Now, and Kim, you just let me know. I think your hand is still raised from earlier, but you let me know if there's something else you wanted to ask about. Up until this point, we're going to be talking to the sales agent. Once we get to this point in the process, though, from here on, for the most part, we're going to be speaking with our builder representative. So make sure that you note their contact information, because we have all the contact info for the on-site agent. But the other person is a lot harder to get the contact info for. So make sure when you are at this pre-construction meeting that you are getting their contact info. Normally, you're only going to be able to get their email, but see if you can get their phone number if possible. In this is a fast meeting. You are either meeting at the model home first or just meeting at the property. But to start off, they're going to go through your selections. They're going to say, okay, this is what I have for you. This is the floor plan. These are all of the selections you've made, both structural and design wise. Then you're going to go out and walk the lot and they're going to say, all right, here's where your property is. This is your property. This is where your house is going to be within the property. And this is your backyard boundary. This is how much is on either side. At that point, it's a little hit or miss. Sometimes they'll just have stakes in the ground and you can just see where the house is going to go, or they might have poured the foundation. It just kind of depends. In essence, they're just starting the relationship and making sure everyone's on the same page. This is a fast meeting. It takes like 15 minutes. But obviously it's understandable. Make sure if there's anything that's different from what you expected, that you do it here. This is normally a month or two after you've gone under contract. Sometimes it's faster, but normally around that. Side note, houses look crazy small when it's just the foundation. You'll walk up and be like, there's no way this is going to be a 2,500 square foot house. I guarantee you it will. It's wild. They look a lot bigger once they're built, but just prep them for that. Also in that, they'll normally talk about where any utility items are going to go, if there's going to be a sidewalk, things like that. Oh, side note, make sure you ask about that stuff in the contract meeting. Out of all the things that they disclose to you, they are terrible about that. And it's not anything that they want to hide. It's just sometimes that information hasn't even been released yet. But if there's going to be a light post, if there's going to be a utility box, if there's going to be a sidewalk, we want to know where it is on the property. Typically, they'll show you at this point in this meeting, but sometimes even then they won't. Another story time real quick. I had a client, an investor of mine, who'd purchased a second property, and he was out of the country. And so I'd been doing the entire process for him by video. And so I went in to do a little update tour halfway through the process, and there was a sidewalk in their front yard. And it was a small front yard. And I'm like, what? I swear I do not remember this. I went back, I looked at the plat map that they had given me. I don't see any sidewalks in there. So I called the builder. I'm like, what is with this? This wasn't one of the things that we signed off on. Come to find out, his lot technically ended before the sidewalk. And so they didn't have to disclose it. Like, what? In what situation for a detached property does the lot not go all the way to the street, right? I've had other people, I've seen it on our Facebook group, where you get all the way towards closing, the house is completely done, and they've got one of those utility boxes right beside the front porch, not even right next to the street, but like right in the yard. Or they have some street posts that they've like paved the driveway almost around, right? Like, how wild. But once it's done, how much can you backtrack, right? So make sure you understand that and really ask those questions and try to get it documented. During this time also, they will provide you, or at least show you, a plat map of your property. Plat map is similar to a survey in that it will show you where your house is going to go in relation to the lot. It should also show you those things, but doesn't necessarily, so make sure you ask. See if you can get a copy of that. If not, take a picture of it. During that time, ask them about surveys. Are surveys included in our purchase? In any other resale purchase, we are opting to have a survey. Surveys are like $500 to $700. Some builders will automatically include a survey with your purchase, but it still won't be free. They'll just give you a discount on it. Oh, how kind, thank you. It'll be like $300 to $500 instead of that higher amount. So just ask, make sure you know. And then we wait some more. Once we've done that, we wait and wait. It normally takes quite some time, but during that time, they're going to start with framing, then they're going to do roofing, plumbing, electrical, HVAC. They'll normally start making some really fast progress after a while. A lot of times the waiting comes from supplies, and they're just waiting for the framing to come in and things of that sort. Then we're going to be doing a pre-drywall meeting. It is exactly what it sounds. Your home is built, electrical or framing is in, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC are done. We will do a pre-construction meeting with the builder at this time, in which case they will walk through with our floor plan and that electrical map type thing that I just showed you, and make sure that every single thing that we've selected, so any pendant light pre-wires are in, any ceiling fan pre-wires are in. They're going to make sure that if we have the if we've selected that we want to have the wiring above the fireplace, that's threaded correctly, right? They're going to be making sure everything that we've selected is in the home and looks good. At this point, you do have the option to hire a third-party inspector. Set the expectation with your client. At this point, you have the option to do a third-party inspection. I need you to know that they're not the cheapest. They're normally around like $300 to $400. They won't find a ton, but I'm not an inspector. You're not an inspector. And at no other point in this process will we be able to see behind your walls. So it would be my strong recommendation that we hire a third-party vendor. Worst case, we get something back and they say everything looks good, but normally there's a few random items to note. And I would much rather us check all of these. Now, when we're talking about third-party inspections in general throughout new construction, I highly recommend them. Sounds incredibly counterintuitive. It's a brand new house. What could be wrong? I'm not saying anything is wrong. And yes, there are a ton of inspections that take place from the time that this home is dirt to the time that it's complete. But all of those inspections are done by independent parties specific to given trades. Your plumbing vendor or plumbing inspector is coming out from the county or city. Same thing with electrical, but they're looking at their specific system. No one aside from the builder manager on site is looking at the functionality of the home as a whole and how all of those systems tie together. And they're definitely not there to do it from the perspective of you as the client and to make sure that they're advocating for you. So let's hire an inspector at that time. They also are going to look at things that are structural. I'm going to do a quick example of this. This is a little example of one of the pre-drywall inspections I've had. The main things that you'll see, again, very small, missing nail plates are a good example. And then they'll have things about the wrapping around the house or shingle damage, random things like that. It will be small, but definitely worth noting. The main ones are going to be things like these. These are called hurricane strips. And so you just need to make sure that if there's a number of studs in the same place, they'll normally tie them together with those strips. And so they'll just make note of the ones that you need. The worst one that I've seen, or most dramatic pre-drywall inspection that I've seen, is a house in Wendell. They did an inspection and one of the roof trusses was slightly broken on a brand new house. The client was not happy, but it comes in on a truck and it likely was just unloaded improperly. And so we needed them to go in and add, you're not going to take a truss out after the roof has been installed, but you can sister it by adding another piece. So things like that. And I definitely, as an agent, wouldn't have caught that. Definitely worth the money if you ask me. Kim, did you have a question about this?
No, I was just going to make the same suggestion. I found that when I have worked with inspectors and help clients to pick them, they typically will give you a better price if you're doing new construction and they're going in looking at it in different levels, as opposed to just doing it at the end. So where they may charge $600 or $700 at the end, they may give you like somewhat of a package price if they're coming in at different levels looking at the home. And to me, it just kind of alleviates a lot of the questions as to, what problems could I have mediated if I would have checked it at each level. So looking at it from the perspective of plumbing, drywalling, all of the different levels that happen before you get to the final phase.
Couldn't agree more. Yep. Thank you. Yes. Another one that you might see on there is they'll make note of things like this. So where there are wires or pipes going through a wall, but especially wires, if it is less than ½ inch from the front of the stud, they're supposed to put one of those metal plates on it so that if you go to hang a picture and you nail it into the stud, you're not hitting electrical. Same thing with plumbing. They should be putting a metal plate over it so that you can't accidentally mess with it, but just make sure you note certain things. I also highly recommend during this, you can do it. I like to put this part on my client. Take pictures of all of your walls and where everything is. And then that way, where your main plumbing line is and not to hang any pictures there. Or if there is a potential leak, God forbid, down the road, at least you know where that pipe is. Again, you will never see behind your walls. Ideally, this is taking place before installation. Installation has been installed. Insulation. Wow. We got there. Insulation has been installed. Occasionally it will take place after that. For any inspection with new construction, whether it's pre-drywall or the one at the end, which we'll talk about in a minute, your inspector needs to go and we need to have the inspection report in hand before our builder meeting, because the goal of the builder meeting is to make a plan for what needs to be done before they move to their next step, and they wait for no one. They'll take forever, but they will wait for no one on their end. And so you need to make sure that when you meet with the builder, any inspection report you have in hand to them so they can add it to their list. Otherwise, it can be a little finicky. Then we continue to wait. They continue to construct the home. They're going to do doors, windows, light switches. Then you're going to start seeing the significant changes. Drywall is going to start going up. It's going to really start feeling like a house. You're going to have the cabinets installed, countertops, fixtures, etc. It's really going to start feeling like a home at this point. Let me move this up if I can. Typically, when cabinets are installed, I might have this as the next slide. Let's see. Yeah, when your cabinets go in, that is typically when you're about 6 weeks out from closing. Until you reach this point, it is very hard to tell exactly when our closing is going to be. Even then, we won't know. We won't really know what our closing date is going to be until we're a few weeks out. But this will give us a general indication. And this is when we should notify our lender. Hey, by the way, we're about 6 weeks out from closing. Cabinets have gone in. I realized I haven't said much about the lender, but please make sure to note, like we said on the front end, send them a copy of the contract once you have it. Make sure they do their conditional approval within 30 days. Then it is going to be radio silent. Make sure you are setting the expectation with your client not to do anything that could jeopardize their loan. You're going to be so excited. You're going to be buying furniture. You're likely going to be buying appliances. Understandably, you need a fridge when you close. Before you purchase anything that is sizable, anything over $200 is my rule. Ask your lender. You might need to pay cash. Definitely don't buy it with credit. You don't want to change anything with your credit score. But remember to raise your hand and give the lender a flag when we're getting close, because they're going to be waiting. They're not going to be in the loop. A good lender will continue to check in, but occasionally it just falls off the radar and they won't know, right? Things start picking up and we start getting excited and we forget that we got someone else to keep in the loop. So make sure you're telling them, because it's not until we get to that point. I mean, keep in mind with resale, we get 30 days to closing. Need to keep the same thing in mind at a minimum. The lender is going to have some work to do. They're going to have to really go through the whole process starting then. So we need to give them that heads up. Also, in terms of expectations, add it to the list of things that we're going to include in that email. The builder will say it when we are doing the contract in general as well, but set the expectation of what the rules are regarding the visitation of their home. Y'all, people love to stalk their house. Understandably, it's exciting. They're going to be driving out there all the time. They're likely going to be walking in it. Don't do it. Don't do it. If you walk in that house when they are actively constructing it, those vendors will walk out sometimes because of insurance reasons. It can be dangerous. And if they see that a client is on the property and there's work being done, they can get fined for it, and they don't play, right? So make sure your clients know if you want to delay your house even further, walk in it, or just make sure you're setting that expectation. There's also going to be stages where it's really unsafe. If it's just framing and you've got some loft, like, don't be going upstairs with your kids, right? Like, wait, we need it to be a safe environment for you guys. So if there are any times where you want to visit the property, please let me know. They won't tell you all of them. Absolutely, they won't. But set the expectation and make sure you set it. Then, so we've done our pre-drywall. They're building it. We've gotten to cabinets. It's starting to look really real. Our next benchmark is going to be our blue tape walkthrough, as we as agents like to call it. Builders hate when we call it that. So it is a warranty walk. It is a time where we are meeting with the builder and they are telling us what the warranties are that come with the property. Your house in and of itself is going to come with a number of warranties, typically a 10-year structural. You'll have some other warranties specific to systems. Each appliance will have its own warranty. Make sure you put it in your calendar as a reminder to send your clients after closing to register all of their appliances with the manufacturer for the warranty. The home itself will come with warranties, but there are certain things the client has to do. Make sure they do it. You'd hate to have an HVAC system go out and you haven't registered the warranty. So make a list of those items, but they'll tell you, they'll start that meeting at normally the kitchen island. They'll go over all of the warranties. They will then walk through and show you where all of your water shutoffs are, and emergency systems like that. They'll tell you how to work the water heater, for example. And then you will walk through the entire house room by room, flagging anything that needs repair. These are going to be cosmetic things like paint updates, any chips on the cabinets, and anything kind of above and beyond that. Sometimes you'll see that a tub might be chipped, even though it was just installed, or something might not look done. There might be a light fixture that's slightly hanging. We need to make sure that's up. Anything that we see, we need to add to the list. So anything that's cosmetic and easy to fix, you're going to put blue tape on. Anything that's kind of above and beyond that, if it's a chip in the cabinet, something that they might have to order, then they're going to add it to a written list and have you sign it at the end of that. Typically the rule is, I'm trying to see, it's like if you're 3 feet away or 5 feet away and you can see it from there, then you can flag it. But we can't be up against the wall and be like, well, there's this imperfection, and putting it on there, right? So just make sure that you kind of note that. Prepare your clients that this is a new construction home, yes. However, it is still built by humans. And so there are always going to be slight things to note. And depending on when you go, at any point, you're always going to find different things. So if we do this today, right now, 2 hours later, you come in, you're going to find totally different things. You come in the evening, you'll find totally different things because lighting changes and it changes what we're able to see. This is our only time to make these type of notes. And so make sure you're doing it now, because we can't come back and we can't continue to add to this list. So make sure they know that it is a moment in time type of meeting. Also, for this reason, if at all possible, there's some situations you can't avoid, but please, please, please make sure your clients are there. In my opinion, it's kind of a liability if they're not, for that reason, especially if they're really specific about stuff, because if you don't see something that they're like, and to my point, lighting changes all the time, and so of course they're going to see something you didn't see. It just, it's not a good feeling for them to say, why didn't you catch that? Right? Like, we're trying to put eyes on as much as possible to make sure that they are there if possible. If not, you want to be doing a video, but just food for thought. Again, we do have the option to have a third-party inspection done prior to this meeting. The hard part with any of these meetings is they don't give you a heads up much. It's normally like a day or two in advance, maybe a week max. Prepare your clients. Set the expectation that two things. One, we're not going to get much of a heads up. And so if you have to give your boss notice before you can go out, that can be tricky. And so we can absolutely try to coordinate these so it takes place during lunch, or slightly towards the end of the day, or right at the beginning of the day. So you maybe just come in slightly later. But number two, these are going to take place during the workday. We are not doing these in the evenings, and we are not doing these in weekends, because these vendors, these builders don't work those times. The sales agent does, but the builder doesn't. And so you need to make sure that you have that availability, because I know that we have a number of things that you're going to have to take off of work for, and I can't control that, but you do need to be there. And we aren't the first person to wish that it was on the nights or weekends, but they're not going to make an exception for us. And so between us here, like, I don't want them to be mad at me about it, right? I know, but set that expectation that there's going to be times they need to take off of work. Like I said, they can do that third-party inspection, do it a day or two in advance. So on that note, in terms of availability, they're not going to give us much of a heads up. It'll be 2 or 3 days in advance. You're like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me sooner, right? It is what it is. They kind of get to a point and then they're like, we're ready, do it now. And that's that. And so make sure you have a tight relationship with your inspector, and make sure you have a few that you're tight with, because thankfully, I feel like most inspectors are able to schedule you pretty quickly, normally within less than a week, but definitely within 1 or 2 days is pretty tight. So as you get closer to this point, start kind of putting a bug in your inspector's ear of, hey, I might be needing you for a new construction final inspection. Can you just kind of keep me on your radar so that when I give you a shout, we're going to need to go pretty urgently, because you want to make sure you're saving that relationship. You can also order a radon inspection at this time. You need to talk with the builder about what true. You may be able to order a radon inspection at this time, but talk with the builder about when you can order it and have it performed, and what their policies are, or if the reading comes back high. The reason this is the case is because radon has to have the doors, windows, everything needs to be closed. And understandably, when vendors are coming in and out and they're running power lines in and out and all these things, the doors are going to be open. And so radon inspections have to take place over the weekend. And so typically what will happen is your inspection will take place whenever, but then your vendor might have to come back out to the property and drop it off on a Friday and pick it up on a Sunday or Monday, so that they can have that reading when the home is truly closed. That said, they might also have you do it after closing. I don't really love that, but some builders, that is their policy. And every builder is different. If radon comes back high, normally their rule is we will give X amount of money as a compensation for you to have it mitigated. It's normally like, we'll give you $1,500. Radon mitigation is likely going to be $1,800 to $2,000. But it's better than nothing, right? The thing to keep in mind here is, unlike resale, new construction does typically do most of those repairs. Although they're not required to, they normally do almost all of them. And so just kind of know that within reason. Then we're going to flag all of that. You're going to sign a document. We're going to give them that inspection when we're at the warranty walk and say, add this to the list. They're going to have all of these little notes. You've got blue tape all over the walls. They've noted everything that we flagged in the warranty walk. And then on that, they will also say, and all items on the inspection report. Then they are going to do all of those things. And we will come back in normally about 2 days, 3 days. The morning of closing is when we are doing this. And we will make sure that they have done everything that they've said they are going to do. And at that time, your client is going to sign on that document that they noted at that original meeting to say everything's been done. Occasionally, there will be items outstanding and they might just make you close anyways. If that's at all possible, try to push and say, we'll close once they're done. But sometimes they're just waiting on a supply and they're not going to wait for that item and extend closing accordingly. One of the examples of this I had was they were waiting on the glass surround for a shower and they were like, it'll be in 2 days. Or same thing with blinds. They're like, they're back ordered. They'll be coming in a few weeks. I know it's really inconvenient, but in the meantime, we'll give you these paper ones that you can hang, but like we'll coordinate with you. And so if that's the case, make sure that you have the attorney, call the attorney ASAP and have them draft an addenda that says builder and buyer agree that X, Y, and Z items are outstanding and will be completed by X date. Make sure you have a date in there and have them sign it. If at all possible, like I said, try to wait to close because obviously once you close, you have a lot less leverage, but some things they're just not going to accommodate you on. So they'll do all those things. We'll go back, make sure it's done. We'll do a final walkthrough and then we'll head right to closing. And then they'll sign and perform closing like they normally would. At that time, also make note of all the warranty dates. Every builder is different. Most of the time they'll say, all right, we'll come back 11 months after you close and you'll walk through the property and fix anything that needs repairing. Most notably, these are going to be nail pops. They like your house to go through a full year, all 4 seasons, because things expand and contract and they want to make sure that your home has gone through that. And so they'll come out one time. Normally they'll come out one time and do the repairs for those nail pops. When they do those types of repairs, they only repair the item, they don't paint. So they'll do like, they'll add the new nail, they'll patch the drywall, but then any paint, if it's above and beyond the builder's color, you will have to be the one that touches it up. Sometimes they'll do 1 month out, 3 months out, and 11 months, or 3 and 11, whatever those benchmarks are, add them to your calendar, because 9 times out of 10, the builder is not the one reaching out to the client. Make sure you ask that for your warranty dates. Do you reach out to the client or do we have to reach out to you? Normally the client has to schedule it. And if you miss that benchmark, you've missed it, especially after you get past the year mark. You got like a 1-year warranty on those items. So make sure that you don't miss it. And it's a great touch point to follow up and keep that relationship with your client. Send them calendar notifications. All right, I've gone over a lot. I've got a few random items to note, but the process as a whole, anyone have any questions about any of those items that we just talked about? Okay, it's a lot to soak in. I know. Thanks for hanging in there, y'all. A few things. One, a topic that will sound like a professional and they'll be like, what did you say? Ask the builder when you're at the meeting, the initial consultation for floor plans and things like that. If they start being serious about a given property and community, ask them, are there any capital contributions? What is that? When you're starting a community, almost all of them now have an HOA. When you're starting a community that has an HOA, they need working capital to get started. Yes, you're paying on a monthly basis or quarterly, whatever the case may be. But until then, they need some sort of working capital. And so when you first purchase, when you're the first phase or first purchaser within a given community, you will likely have to buy in to the HOA to a certain extent. That might be $1,000, $2,000. It's some expense that you likely aren't expecting to budget for. So make sure you ask that question. That's a closing cost your client would need to expect. We also want to ask if they have a cap on investors. What is their policy for rentals? Do you have a cap on investors? Even if they're buying as a primary residence. Why? Because it affects their resale. If you buy this house and you intend on staying here for 10 years, you don't care at all. And then what do you know? Life changes happen and we need to move in a year or two. But we're not ready to sell yet, or maybe we're coming back, or the equity doesn't make sense for us to sell yet. Can I rent it out? And if I can't, that's going to put me in a situation. I need to know that. Make sure you're asking that question. But definitely if it's an investor, you need to ask that question. Again, we're going to ask about the lot survey. Also, we want to make a note of builder tolerances. This is just a side conversation to have with your clients, mainly when you're walking the house. Normally when we're walking the floor plans as an example of what they can expect, I'll make note of those. And so there's some houses you'll walk in and you'll kind of be like, am I looking at this right? And you'll kind of put your head near the wall and you'll see that wall kind of goes like this. Here's the thing, they normally won't fix it. wild, right? But builders have certain tolerances. And so as long as it falls within that tolerance, as long as the difference between what's kind of the standard straight line, whatever that difference is, as long as it's within their tolerance, they won't fix it. Again, they're human, everything's built by humans. So there's going to be some variances, but if you're walking through, this happened once where I was walking through a neighborhood, it was a lot of inventory homes, a lot of a lower price point. And it was like every single house I walked into, I was like, man, this wall is pretty notable. And so if we see that on a lot of them, it might happen on yours and they might not fix it. So would you be okay with that? Just make note of it. It's okay. If it's the right price point, it's the right house, and you're like, ugh, not ideal, right? But what you don't want to have happen is have them go in and understandably not know about it and think understandably that would be fixed. And then they won't, in a brand new house, who wants a crooked wall? Worksite conditions, another expectation to set. It is an active construction site. It is going to be dirty. There is going to be lunch trash around. It is not the prettiest. There's going to be dirt everywhere. And it takes a while for your house to get to the stage of completion. And so when you walk through it, you don't see X, Y, and Z done. You don't see those pendant light installs or like, well, of course not. They haven't done it yet, right? Or of course that's there. It's a construction site. Just let them know it's gonna be dirty, y'all. I'm sorry. I know it seems obvious, like this is your largest asset and like treat it with respect, and they will, but there will be some trash. Just know that. On that note, if you walk through a few of them and you start to kind of get that vibe, as you get more experience, I have had a few situations where I'll go in and I'll be like, wow, they keep it really clean. Their construction sites are really clean. Like, I know it sounds silly. I know it doesn't really matter to y'all, but like this builder, this is not, they don't normally look this way. Right? Just make little notes like that. Again, make note of the appliances and outlets, things like that. Excise tax. Also, excise tax is normally something that the seller pays in any situation. I think it's like $2 per thousand. In new construction, the buyer pays for it. Also make note of your taxes, what you're paying right now for this property. Your tax value is based strictly on the land. And so your taxes are going to go up next year because it has a huge improvement on it. So just be ready for that. Also, ADA adjustments. These are adjustments based on requests by the buyer that might be based on disabilities or handicaps or accessibility. Some builders will have adjustments that they can do based on this. Unfortunately, they're not all required to, right? So like if it's an inventory home, they don't have to go in and make some adjustment, but especially if it's pre-sale, you can definitely make that ask. A good example of that, I have a client whose daughter was in a wheelchair. And so going in, we had made the ask that certain door frames be widened if at all possible. And we made the ask that the entry, it was a very flat neighborhood. We asked if at all possible, we have a 0 level entry. And so like there wouldn't be any bump or any steps going in, so that they wouldn't have to install a ramp of any sort. And the builder agreed to that. Now make note that they can only do it in certain areas, right? So if you've got some bedroom where like you walk in and there's like another doorway here, right? Like you can only extend it so much if there's another wall right here. And so even if they say yes to certain things, they might not have space to do it in certain places. So in that case, for example, they had a home, they said yes to the 0 entry. And then her daughter's bedroom was going to be, the bedroom is supposed to be a flex space. We converted that to a bedroom, or upgraded that to a bedroom with bathroom. And so there was like a little entry. The bathroom was right in front of you and bedroom was right here. And so because of the way that these two doors met, there wasn't really space to widen them, but we asked that they simply not install the trim and instead finish it as drywall. And then after closing, we're going to install a sliding barn door just around that little alcove. And then that way she would be able to fit through there. So just kind of make note of those things. If they agree to them, they will be adding it as part of the contract. Some builders are better about it than others. Shout out to H&H Homes. They did a great job with this. At closing, or right before closing, I went out to the property and there was like this much of a difference between the sidewalk going into the house and the little front porch area. And so I just asked, hey guys, I know that that's a small amount, but just to make things simple, like, is there any way you could re-pour that one area of concrete? And they did. They went in and re-poured it and sloped it, but just kind of stay on top of it. and I know we already talked about commissions, make sure you prep your clients on that, make sure you are taking a look at it, to Kim's point, making a note, downloading that MLS. Building timelines will vary. It's really hard to know. I can't guarantee anything. We talked about contingencies. We talked about delays in closing. They can happen for them for any and all reasons. If they happen on our part, we likely will get charged per day. Also, total side note, but I got this question the other day from one of our agents. Why are all of their days 0 days on market on MLS? It's been on the market for 6 months. Well, it's because, like we talked about at the beginning, there's no standard for when they're required to put it in. They could put it in a dirt, pre-drywall, drywall, whatever, right? And so because of that, it can, you know, when you see something that's been on the market for 200 days, you're like, oh, what's wrong with it, right? It's kind of just an automatic thought process regardless, or you can be like, oh, maybe I'll get a deal, right? When in reality, it's very hard to buy a house when it's a dirt or a pre-drywall because it's hard to visualize. But regardless, you might want to still market it and try. And so MLS has just agreed that any new construction will just show as 0 days on market. And that's why. Also make note, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking to the on-site agent for the first part of the process, but then after construction starts, we are pretty much only talking with the builder. So make sure you have all of that contact info. Whew, I've talked a lot. That is thankfully all I have for you guys. I know it is a lot to absorb. Do you guys have any questions? Is there anything of note that is really surprising to you or is vastly different from what you expected? I know Allison and Kim had mentioned Atlanta. Is there anything kind of dramatically different from there to here? Anything you guys want to kind of chime in and add, or any major takeaways? It's too much. We're ready for a break.
Well, no, I mean, I'm definitely ready to kind of relax, but for me, I didn't notice anything significant, but then there were a couple of times I had to drop off because I had to take other calls. So I'm going to go back through and kind of review this whole thing, because I just wanted to find out if you talked about how we could possibly negotiate maybe the incentives, so that maybe the client doesn't want as many incentives, but they're wanting more money off or something along those lines, or to buy down their points or something along those lines. I don't know if you talked about that, but that's what I was kind of looking for.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about negotiations. I didn't talk about that specifically. A great question and great thought process. I don't know. I mean, if they were offering like $7,000, for example, in closing costs, if you use the preferred lender and attorney, I don't know if you could say, we don't want the closing costs, but can we get a lower purchase price? Now, that said, I don't necessarily know why someone might want to do that. I guess if their closing costs are going to be less than the amount that we are getting in incentives, then we want to make sure we're capitalizing on all of it. But most of the time, it's just a conversation of like cash on hand versus long-term payment. And would a $7,000 difference or something of that sort make a big difference in what your monthly payment would be? And would it make sense to lower the price? I don't know. But regardless, I don't know if that's something that they would do laterally. In terms of buying down the rate, I didn't talk about that just because that's going to be so specific to any given lender. And I think it would be a conversation that you would just need to have with the lender up front, and then say, let's circle back to this as we get closer, because to that point, it'll be a while before they can lock in their rate. And so the options for loan packages may even change in that amount of time. But when you watch it back, just give me a call if you have questions about anything specific to that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything to share? All right. Well, I will send you guys a copy of all of this. As always, just kind of use it as your benchmark, make a checklist of sorts. Really and truly, though, our value here to the client comes in educating them and really in setting those expectations. I know to Amy's point, like really just having your clients know what they're getting into and what their options are is half the battle, right? It's a big decision and there's a lot that can be known or unknown. So take a look. I so appreciate y'all's time. I know it was a lot. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Thanks for your time. Bye. Of course.
Thank you.
Of course.